Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Haley. I am a recent graduate, a caregiver, and a cashless budgeter who is working on her relationship with finances as well as working towards financial freedom. If any of this is something you're interested in, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get into it. So this layout here is how I do my monthly budget. Certain sections on here are already pre-filled out because at recording this video, I've already received my first paycheck of October. I wanted to record a budget version of how I lay this layout out every month, and then do the actual budgeting, but that did not work out. So I decided to just do it all in one video. So I will explain the budget part first and then go through my actual numbers after. Income. I am paid bi-weekly. I use this budget number of $950. My check comes above this, even with the most minimum hours, no overtime. I do make above this per check. However, I like to budget on a bare bones budget. I take this $950. This was my income at one point, before any raises or any increase in my income. And I still keep this budget number, at least I have for the past year. Not only am I used to keeping or having this number in my budget, but it also helps me keep my expenses to a bare minimum and avoid lifestyle creep, or any uptick outside of bills in my check. So there's that. That totals together to a monthly income of $1,900 budgeted. Now, with my debts, this was also in my debt confession, I have 2 student loans remaining, and one I pay with my first check, which is my most bill-heavy check, and the second one that I'm doing a debt avalanche with gets paid from my second check in order to have a larger payment. Again, if you hear tippy taps, that is my Pity Pebble walking in and out of the office on the wooden floor. So there's that if you hear him. And also, you know what, leave a hi in the comment for him because I'm sure he would love the attention. Anyway, so these numbers are pretty standard. They do not change as of right now. The only number that may get an increase is this second student loan, this Direct Plus loan that I'm doing the avalanche for. And or it's a magic month where I get a third check and I may pay towards this loan, but definitely put extra towards the largest one. And then here is a line for expenses. I consider my expenses as far as spending is concerned debts. They are an amount I have to pay off either at the end of the week or at the end of the month. I am personally a fan of credit cards. I understand that everyone is a credit card person. However, I am pretty okay with credit cards and pay them off at the end of the week, if not per check. So I consider those debt, and I do allocate a certain amount in order for me to spend every month. If I do not spend this, for example, $60 that I budgeted, it just gets carried over to the next month. I still budget $60 in the next month, and I'll explain why later on. So once debt comes out, I move on to my bills. Tithes are standard, I would say standard, in the sense that I budget my tithes based off of this $190 per month. I take 10% of this, that's my tithes number. However, if one of my checks were to come in higher, in this case this one did, then I take 10% of this and write the difference and add it on to basic math struggling with right now, mentally apparently. Each check is technically 10% of each check that I budget is $95. That $95 together makes the $190. If my first check, the 10% of that is $5 above that, so it's $100, then I add $5 more to that 95 to make it 100. I hope all of that made sense. In the case of the check that came in for my first check, it was $10.71 or 10%, $107. That excuse me, that was $12 above the $95. So I added $12 to this $190 total to make $202 given for tithes for this month. I'll explain what I do with my second check if it comes up above, if the 10% comes above $95 in a future video. Okay, I hope all that made sense. Anyway, if it didn't, I'll try to explain better in my next video because it'll come up again. These bills are individualized and broken down, but I've just grouped them for the sake of space and simplicity. Household and general bills, utilities, other things I had to pay for that are expected. With this channel, the only envelope that I will probably stuff physically on this channel is my care credit card. My care credit card I consider a general health bill. Just like my spending on a card, I consider that a bill. I will not include, and you will not see, rent in my budget. As explained before, house we live in is paid off. We don't have a mortgage associated with this house. So we have rent in the form of taxes and saving up throughout the year to pay for taxes at the end of the year. And or when property tax time comes around. So I budget for that in a different area, which we'll get to later. So my personal bills are my personal bills. I'm not going to outline those, but those get $95. Insurance, car insurance, life insurance, health insurance, premiums get taken out of my check before I get my check. So this is mostly for life and car insurance. Is budgeted as $189, and then other. I leave this other line mostly for any type of expense that'll be coming out, and I signify whether or not it's from sinking funds or not. In this case, this $190 is coming out for my dog's prescription. It comes out every 6 months, but that will be coming from his sinking fund. Therefore, I do not subtract it from my total expenses for the month. Okay, so that leaves me with $311 in total. And I moved down to variable expenses and ASP. ASP is the automatic savings program through my bank, and I try to set up automatic withdrawals. I check on them at least every quarter-ish, or at least every 2 months, to see if I still want to continue money movement in that particular bucket and or envelope. But most of the time it's consistent, or I try to keep the same envelopes for at least 6 months. The envelopes may change, but the total I put towards them does not. So $5 bi-weekly and $2 weekly is basically $7 a week coming out of my buffer in my checking account into my savings. Where I allocate it from there will vary, and this quarter is for my car deductible, future home down payment savings, and opportunity fund and or dream year challenge, which again I go in detail about those in a previous video breaking down my binders. I will leave a link in the description and in the cards for that. Then retirement. I do have retirement coming out of my check in the form of 401k pre-tax from my job, and I do receive a match from my job. This retirement is for my Roth IRA. I was putting more into it, but when I decided to focus on debt paydown, I did reduce all of my investments to where my 401k is simply my company's match, and nothing more. And my Roth IRA really kind of suffered in its process. But I have it coming out to at least $20 monthly. My goal is to incrementally increase that. And again, I'll make a 2025 goal video at a later date. But I try to increase this by at least $5 every couple months. So right now I'm at $20 monthly. The next goal will be $25, then $30, $35, so on and so forth, until I either am out of debt or have my debts low enough to where I can reallocate money towards my retirement. So there's that, and it's auto-drafted out of my account. So that's why it's highlighted as a bill here, because I always keep this in my budget. This is non-negotiable. Okay, and then we have my account buffer. My account buffer and my expense number, I kind of budget together. So a total of $75 a month will be kept in my account. Whether it goes to buffer or to spending varies from month to month. Depending on needs, if I need to refill my account buffer or refill my spending because something came up or whatnot. But generally speaking, I try to keep at least a standard of $15, $20 going into my account buffer and the rest going towards spending and or miscellaneous money that can be spent elsewhere. My account buffer, the goal for my account buffer is at least $500, and I chose that number as it's the highest expense that will come out of my account at one time. In this case, that's my student loan payment, minimum payment of $500. Will I increase that? Maybe one day or one point in time in the future, but for right now, I think having at least my highest bill in my account buffer will save me from incurring any fees or overdrafts if a bill automates on a different day than what I was expecting. A different day than what I was expecting, and or there are multiple withdrawals happening at the same time. So there's that, and so my remaining balance budgeted is $291. And moving over to sinking funds. Sinking funds, my short-term sinking funds, and my sink or swim binder, which again will be in my binder breakdown, and my car envelopes are mostly funded from my first check. I usually don't put extra in here unless I need to work towards a particular goal and I'm behind, or there was a cost increase somewhere in one of these envelopes and need to account and make up for that. So budgeting wise, I put $30 in each, but if I can afford to put more evenly from my first check, then I do. And then these in the blue bracket right here are my savings challenges. My emergency fund actually gets filled and or stuffed in my first check. However, if I have extra in my second check, a couple of dollars here or there, I also put that in my emergency fund. And I signify that with this line here, as in this $80 was what went into there for my first check, and then if I have extra to put into my second check, it reminds me to put it as a budget line in my other and or extra category. If there's rollover. If there's not, then that's fine. Just put a 0 and I move on. But it's mandatory from my first check. Every check. At least $60 per check. And then the rest of these challenges, and there's my dog. I don't know if you heard him exhale. He sounds so exasperated. Anyway, I've never seen a dog be so tired from doing nothing. So, moving on. The rest of these 4 are my savings challenges. These can vary throughout the year depending on what my focus is, but I've decided to have these 4 challenges be my foci for the rest of this year and going into 2025. Again, if you'd like to hear my reasoning why and how I plan on funding all of these, you can check out my binder breakdown for my emergency fund and savings challenges. So, these numbers budgeted, honestly, is just the remainder of the $291. These numbers do not have to stay. I mostly do these at random. Why? Because I use scratch-offs. And I scratch off the scratch-offs to budget the next number that I would need. In the case of saving for taxes, the highest I want to put in there is $100 at any given time, unless there's extra. So I just put 100, and the number I save can be 100, can be 93, can be 70, can be $2. It all depends on what the scratch off is and what the scratch off number is and how much of the previous number I've paid off. Then opportunity and personal savings, in this case, would be my Dream Year Challenge, and that I try to at least put the scratch off value in full on there every month. In the case of that challenge, I believe the highest number is 20, so I budget 25 just in case there's a number I haven't fulfilled, and or I can fulfill this number and I can scratch off another number and it's above 20 in total. Then I can get both numbers done at the same time. Home, this is my 100 envelope down payment challenge. I do not put in $100 every single time. I wish I could, that'd be great. But I cannot. So I put 30 here mostly because this is minimum what I like to put in there every month. Obviously, the more I can put in there, the better, and that'd be great. Travel savings. Travel is more so my lower priority, so I put $16. It depends on what the scratch-off number is. If it needs a little bit more, and let's say it's a number 20 or 19 or something, then I could add a couple of dollars to make up for that. But again, it's a lower priority, so it gets the least amount budgeted, so to speak. And doing all of that, I come out to a zero-based budget. Now, to explain my expenses a little bit better, here you can see I have September refund on this number. There are some expenses that come up after I've already budgeted and accounted for my second check. Due to me being paid bi-weekly, sometimes we get a third check in a month, and sometimes certain bills fall within that check or in between that time period rather than perfectly with my first check or perfectly with my second check. So most of the time I take that money from my spending in my account and or account buffer and pay it back with the budget number that I have for the following check. This is not done very often. I don't have this very often. I plan my bills based on whether or not they fall in my first and second check. But life happens, things happen. In this case, needed more gas for traveling because I had a friend come out of town and we had lunch together. Like, I'm not going to say no just because it's falling in between one of my checks. Of course, nothing bougie or overly fancy. But I'm not going to say no to those experiences, especially when we hadn't seen each other in a long time. And then other reasons I would be spending in between those two checks are when there are sales or deals or something I have to go shopping for that I was going to go shopping for anyway. Which, to remind people, it's not a steal or deal if you weren't going to get that item in the first place. So in this case, there was a sale on laundry items that I was going to buy with this check anyway, so I went ahead and spent for it, had it on my card, and then retroactively paid it off from this check. So yeah, that's basically the bulk of what my budgeting looks like. Of course, numbers can shift around, numbers can change, especially between my budget and actual numbers. In between checks, I try to keep up with my expenses as much as possible. And I will leave some links to expense spreadsheets, budgeting sheets, both some freebies or downloads or Etsy shops that actually have inspired me to have this outline. I personally like notebooks. It allows me to highlight, scratch out, color what I want to. And budgets are fluid. Some of these expenses may not be here. Some of these challenges may not be here or be fully funded and move on. So I like the flexibility that a notebook gives me. Plus, it's simple. I don't need to go and print it off every month. I just sit, write, and that be it. So I thank you guys for watching this video. I really enjoy doing this, and I really appreciate each and every one of you. I hope you have a blessed night or day wherever you are in the world, and I hope to see you in my next video where I actually get to allocate all of these funds that fell within my first check. Alright, so if you have any questions, comments, and concerns, leave them down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye guys!